Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another C3 Workplace webinar. I'm Donna Miller, President and Founder, and your host for this event. I'm joined here today by Laura Melville, who is our Accounting Support Services Director. And just a little background before we get into the meat of the program today. Many of you may know, but C3 Workplace, the C3 stands for Connect, Collaborate, Community. And what we have done for the last 20 years is we provide flexible workspace, all types of back office support, including bookkeeping and accounting, which is what we'll be focusing on today, and education, which clearly this webinar is part of our education. Our goal in offering these three buckets is to help businesses start and grow. We do that in a community environment. We want to foster collaboration. We want to help accelerate everyone's growth. And we're seeing that happen. And the beautiful thing is we grow, you grow, and my vision is that that growth will spill into the communities that we live in. And honestly, we're seeing that happen, so it's a pretty exciting thing. So we're happy to bring you these webinars, and as you know, if you're a follower, we do these QuickBooks webinars on a regular basis. And also a little bit of housekeeping. You are all muted, and this webinar is being recorded. Now, if you have any questions, you have a chat window. So just type your questions into the chat window, and I will monitor those questions as we go along during this half-hour webinar. So again, in trying to help you do what you do better, our topic today is budgeting, forecasting, and performance review. Now, I have to give all of you credit for being here because very often when we talk about budgeting and forecasting, people kind of run for the hills. In fact, I've had people say, oh, my stomach just turned. So, but the reality is, those of you who know me and who follow me in my blogging or on my speaking engagements or my workshops, I know that in order to succeed, you have to know your numbers. So what we're talking about today is very fundamental to knowing your numbers. So let me introduce and turn the presentation over to Laura Melville, who is going to talk to you more about this topic. Let me start the slideshow. There we go. All right, so Laura, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Let's just start off with giving a brief definition on each of these. A budget is, in its simplest form, a budget is a plan for the year. It's an estimate of how much income you think you will take in and how many expenses you think you will pay out in a certain time frame. Most often, this time frame is a calendar or fiscal year, depending on the tax year for your business.
Right, and I think everyone, or most people, understand what a budget is, and I think that sometimes I often want to talk to people about budget is you've done it for your house. You have to do it for your house. You couldn't have gotten a mortgage. You couldn't have decided how much rent you could pay if you didn't have a budget. So it's that same tool taken to the business side.
Exactly, exactly. The next one we're going to discuss is a forecast. And a forecast is very similar to a budget, but unlike a budget, it's continually changing. It, too, is an estimate of how much money you think you'll take in and how many expenses you think you will pay out in a certain time period. But a forecast changes based on information gained during the course of your tax year.
Right. Now, the reality is, if you came out of the corporate world and you had any budget responsibility, you understand what a forecast is. And I remember 1,000 years ago, before I had my own company, I worked for a chemical company and I was involved in marketing and sales. And every year we had to sit there and do our sales forecast. And it was cumbersome and challenging, but without doing those forecasts, we don't know what to shoot for. And your next definition, I think, ties right in.
Exactly.
With how do we do?
Exactly. I'm sure many of you are familiar with performance reviews. You know, it's that time of year when the employers and employees sit down and assess where the employee is at. How well did the employee do this year? What improvements to be made by the employee? Will there be a raise? And so on and so forth. And it's my opinion that the same process should be given to a business as well. Questions could go like, how is the business doing? What improvements can be made to increase profitability? Will the owner be able to take a salary from the company this year? And so on.
All very, very, very important questions. Great.
Exactly.
So now we know what the definitions are.
Okay.
It still seems a little daunting, and I'm sure it seems a little daunting to our participants. So break it down for us.
All right, we'll try to make it less daunting. Basically, when you put these three parts together, the benefits can far outweigh the time, effort, and even cost involved if it's done so correctly. First, you need to establish your budget, and many of you may ask, how do you do that? There are several ways you can do this, all with different degrees of time commitment and detail. Basically, you'll get back from the budget what you put in. Many software programs, such as QuickBooks, have a budget component built right in. The challenge comes in entering the estimates, what you think you're going to do. If you're a new business with a lot of historical information, with not a lot of historical information, you'll just have to start out with your best estimate. This can take some time and thought. If you're creating a budget for the first time and you do have historical information, take a good look at that history. Don't just take last year's results and divide by 12, which I've seen people do. There are very few businesses out there that have the same exact results each month of every year. Look at your history and what trends or patterns or cycles you see, and then use that information to enter good estimates. For example, say you're a landscaper in the Northeast and you do not do snow plowing. You may look back historically and see that for January, February, March, every year your sales drop dramatically. Reflect that when you're entering your January, February, March numbers going forward.
Right, and I think that, as we talk about inputting, I've always found, frankly, that the expense numbers are easier for me to forecast than the income numbers. I honestly am in a better position to control and forecast expenses, for the most part, than I am income.
Very true.
But that historical data gives me some guidelines for what, best case and worst case scenario might be, and, like you said, what the seasonal nature of it is.
Exactly. And you can look back at your historical information and, apply formulas to things. For example, like there's a day's sales outstanding formula that can basically tell you how often you collect your receivables and when. So take a look at that, and based on that number, you can kind of guess what you're going to do through the rest of the year and go from there.
Gotcha. And, of course, the more years we're at this, the quote-unquote easier it gets. And I'm not sure it gets easier. You just have better data and you have more confidence in making forecasts.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. The next two steps work hand in hand as far as the forecast and the performance review. On a regular basis, in my opinion, monthly or quarterly, have that performance review. How did you do compared to your original budget that you don't change? How did you do? Were you really far off? If so, why? What things did you not consider that you hadn't thought about at the time? Were there things that happened unexpectedly? Will those affect things in the future? Have you learned things headed your way or your industry's way in the future that may impact your future results? Take all of this wonderful information and do your best calculations and plan ahead now by adjusting your forecast out several months, if possible.
Right, and I think that, the way that I equate that in QuickBooks language is the reports that I review are budget versus actual. It's sitting on a board every month. We look at budget versus actual. We look at last year versus this year, which also helps to proceed with that adjustments that need to be made.
Exactly.
But the other thing is, and this isn't really part of this QuickBooks, but the reality is we have a CRM system and we have opportunities in our pipeline. So when we're doing our forecasting or we're making adjustments, we need to incorporate that sales pipeline into our decision-making process for budgeting as well.
Exactly.
So it's another tool that a company might use to help create realistic forecasts.
Yep, very important tool. I agree with that. So many of you might ask, when does this all happen? And for your budget, I would think you would try to work on this during the last quarter of the tax year, and I'll explain why. I'll explain that in more detail in a little bit. But the forecast and the performance review should definitely be no less than quarterly, and if you can manage monthly, that would be even better. Frequently and on schedule is the best thing. A helpful hint I give several people that attempt this is to schedule specific dates and deadlines for the performance reviews in the next year while you're creating your budget. Keeping accountable and regimented is key. Make it, and possibly, at least a portion of the performance review a company-wide event, and I'll explain that in a little bit as well.
Well, I think the other thing is, like anything, when you own or are growing a small business, there's the accountability issue. So you have to look at this process as another layer of accountability. Is this something you're going to do internally with yourself, or are you going to enlist the help of your accountant, your on-call CFO, your bookkeeper? We've always taken a very CFO approach to bookkeeping. Not all bookkeepers do that. But it's a good something, I think, also to get an outside perspective on.
Definitely. Many of us who have our own businesses or are working very hard in business, you're just so busy that the time isn't made to review it. And that's an important task. And it's also good to have a fresh set of eyes, too.
Right. I think the reality is, as I've done it over the years more and more frequently, what should pop out pops out more readily just because you've established patterns and you can identify variations in those patterns that you should be looking at.
Exactly. It becomes easier. The more frequent you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, like most things.
Exactly. A necessary evil.
Exactly.
So then, it's a lot of time, effort, some costs involved in doing this. As you're listening, you may be thinking, why plug in all this time and effort? Is it really worth all the work? And the answer is yes, it is worth it. Your business will be better off for it, and thus so will you. At first I have to say, too, you're not going to see immediate results on this. It very often takes some time to reap the rewards of this work.
Right, because sometimes those forecasts are just best guess estimates, so it takes time to actually get the whole process defined.
Yes, there'll be things you never even considered or thought of, so it's kind of a work in progress. But at some point, you'll obtain a pretty good idea of how your company is doing and will do month to month, and how it will get there and why it will get there. Also, if you have a data-packed estimate of how much money you'll bring in and how much money is going to be going out on a monthly basis, well, that's your cash flow. I don't know any business that doesn't want a comfortable expectation of their cash flow. It's good to know ahead of time periods of expected cash flow and lack of cash flow. It's better to plan now to best get through each of those types of periods. And lastly, the forecast. We like to do ours on a rolling basis, meaning each month, as our performance review closes, we use all we've learned and we go out at least one more month. So at any point in time, we have 12 months of forecast out there.
Well, and that means once you do it the first time, your rolling forecast or your ongoing forecast really is part of your monthly review.
Exactly. And the best part of that is, if you start this now, at this time next year, your budget for 16 is done.
Exactly.
And it's done with relevant, good information that you've gathered throughout the year.
So let me just stop 1 second and repeat that, because I think it's worth repeating. The way we do this as an organization, the way we do this for our clients is in creating the budget, there's an initial setup, and then part of the monthly or quarterly review is making it into a rolling budget. So in reality, there's only ever one setup, and the budget is perpetual.
Exactly.
With the monthly or quarterly review.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And you're using great information, and you'll find over time that you're pretty spot on.
And the thing is, you also talked about at the beginning of this slide, what's in it for me? I like to sometimes bring it down to really basic tactics or facts. The reality is there is not one medium to large to mega corporation that does not do budgeting and forecasting. Right. So as a smaller business owner, that doesn't mean that you're exempt from that process.
Exactly.
It just means that if you incorporate that, you're working smarter, and in my opinion, you are then able to make decisions better. And cash flow obviously is huge. But also, part of this process is what we always talk about, which is financial literacy. If you don't know your numbers, how do you know which areas of your business you should be putting more marketing effort into? You don't want to market one of your less profitable products or services. You want to know your numbers well enough so that you can market the products and services that are going to bring you the most profit.
Exactly.
So it's all about financial literacy, and this is a key component of financial literacy. I mean, the reality is when you start a business, you have to write a business plan. I hope.
Of course.
And, you know, a big part of the business plan is the financial projection. At that point, it's a complete forecast.
Yep.
But that forecast then needs to turn into budget versus actual and an ongoing part of your basic financial review so that you stay literate and can make data-driven decisions.
Exactly. And, you know, you mentioned different parts of your business being profitable or not profitable. We actually had a client who had two businesses. Thought one was, you know, brought in all the money, was doing great, and the other one could have taken it or, you know, left it. But the reality is the one that he could say take or leave was the profitable one.
Right.
The one that brought in all the money also sent out all the money.
Right.
And it
so
was
the margins were much, much lower.
Exactly.
Right.
He was shocked, and he was gone several years thinking that's the way. So it's very important to review and even get a fresh set of eyes. You look at things 2-3 times and you think you're seeing everything until new eyes come in and say, oh, but did you notice this?
Right, and I think the challenge also is what I've found, you know, we've been in business a long time. We've had the great good fortune of helping well over probably 1,500 companies at this point. But the longer people work in a business, sometimes the more stuck in their patterns they get.
Okay.
It's akin to teaching yourself how to golf incorrectly. And over a long period of time, you're almost untrainable.
Exactly.
So the reality is you have to put these tools in place at whatever point you're at so that from this point forward you could be moving in the right direction.
Exactly. Definitely. One other thing I want to get back to is I mentioned in the performance reviews to, if possible, make it a company-wide event. And this holds true for businesses with 2 people, 10 people, even 20 people or more. And the reason I say this is you go through the budget. The employees are often what drives some of the line items for revenue and expenses. You know, there's no use creating a budget and not letting those that are actually going to be determining the final results know that budget. And if time and resources permit, you can even create maybe incentives for profitability without sacrificing quality. You know, I consider that a win-win and a motivator for employees.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And, you know, that is true on the income side. It's also true on the expense side.
Oh, yeah.
And the story that I would share is that when the economy crashed, just after that, like all businesses, we had to take a really good look at where we were at and where could we cut expenses and how could we change what we were doing to survive what was a very difficult time for everyone. And I made my team part of that process. We actually turned it into a team building event where we said, okay, we have to raise revenue $10,000 a month. We either have to raise revenue or we have to reduce expenses or it has to be some combination. So the team was pivotal in authoring how do we get through that time. And it just made such a difference in what it felt like to come to work in what otherwise would have been a really, really difficult time. And fortunately, we did okay. Nobody got laid off. Everything worked out fine. But I totally agree with you, even almost more so on the downside. People would rather be part of the process than to be conjuring up this whole idea of what might happen in their own head.
Exactly.
So I couldn't agree more that this performance review, these forecasts, this budget, is company-wide, and it's a major way that you can empower your people.
Keeps them very engaged as well.
Right. Now, a lot of our companies are solopreneurs. So the reality is company-wide events, it may take on a little bit of a different meaning. For our solopreneurs, that could be very honestly, you may need to get your significant other involved. You want them to be part of the process. It may be that you have a couple of key subcontractors or key vendors or partners of some type. So when you think of company, even if you think it's just quote-unquote you, your company is always more than you.
Exactly.
It could be you and your accountant. Mm-hmm. So, you know, get outside perspective and redefine what company actually means for you.
And keep the lines of communication open.
Absolutely. And revisit.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
All right. So kind of just to give a little summary of everything we've discussed and why you should do this, if you should do this, how you should do this. If you're having cash flow issues, or if you're not sure when and where to invest time and money in your business, or if you're having a hard time getting employees engaged, if you want to grow your company, if you want to sell your company at a certain point in time, you know, do yourself a favor now and create the budget. Review your results monthly and or quarterly, and use what you've learned in that review to plan out the next 12 months continuously. You'll be very glad you did.
Absolutely. And the thing that I want to extract out of what you just said is if you want to sell your business. Well, from the day I opened my business, I thought of exit strategy. My exit strategy has since changed, but it's always about exit strategy. And you can't get so emotionally attached to your business that you don't make, again, sound financial decisions. And putting these systems in place, or putting, frankly, most any systems in place in regard to your company, that is absolutely how you build value in your company. Because sometimes, if you're a professional service firm, and a lot of our clients are, as a professional service firm, you have what's called goodwill to sell. Mm-hmm. But if you have systems and goodwill, the value of your goodwill actually goes up. So, yes, there is a cost involved at the front end, but this is a down-the-road benefit that you can also get out of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Great. Well, as usual, we ran right up until the last minute. So, Laura, I want to thank you. Tell our participants, now, we provide accounting support services. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, that has been bookkeeping. We do on-site, off-site, regular basis, quarterly basis, check-ins, training, but tell our participants about our part-time CFO services, because if they need help with this budget, mm-hmm. they may not know that it's something that we can actually do for them in a very affordable way.
Exactly, and it is very affordable. Basically what we like to do, we've done with our clients in the past, is come in, you know, some of our clients we already know, we know their business, we know how they run, so it's kind of skip that step. But for new clients, you know, we each get to know a little bit about their business, take a look at their book, see how good their accounting system is, their bookkeeping system. Say if they use QuickBooks, is it good information? And we have to start with that. Your
right.
bookkeeping
has to be good. At the beginning. You know, it's like anything else, junk in, junk out. So that's right. The initial effect.
So we see that, you know, assuming that's all great, then we move on and we create a budget. And we look at history, whatever history is available, kind of interview the client and ask some questions that they may know about their industry that's coming or has happened or others are experiencing, much information as we can gather. We do a 12-month budget. And then I like to start out monthly reviewing it. It doesn't always have to be monthly. It could go to quarterly. But at the beginning, monthly is pretty important just to see how we're doing. And then you take a look at how you did for the month and how that compares to what you budgeted. Why was it off? And you kind of tweak it and adjust it. And then, you know, sometimes the business owner will say, oh, I forgot to tell you about this. Okay, well, now in our forecast, we're going to reflect this. You know, we can even take a look at, you know, their cash in may be up and down, but their sales are steady. Well, why? That doesn't make too much sense. So, yeah, you can take a look at their either collection calls they make or their payment terms, are they being stringent, this, that, and everything. It opens up to a lot of questions and answers.
Right. So the reality is it's more affordable than people think. We meet you with all of our services. What we're exceedingly good at is meeting you where you're at and creating a cost-effective solution to get you where you want to go. Mm-hmm. The reality is you may not have the budget to do everything. What we'll do is we'll prioritize and we'll create a package that makes sense for you, for where you're at, and help you to get where it is you're trying to go. So if any of that makes sense to any of you, either Laura or I are happy to talk that through with you. Laura's contact info is on the screen. I think you all know how to reach me, but I am Donna at c3workplace.com. So we want to thank you for joining us today. We want to wish you a great day, a great week, and we thank you for participating. If you have any, we're out of time, so if you have any specific questions, feel free to email them to Laura or I, Laura at C3 Workplace, Donna at C3 Workplace, and we'll be happy to get answers back to you. And if there's any way that we can help you be more financially literate, reach out. We're always happy to help. Laura, thanks so much as always.
Oh, thank you. Very welcome.
Have a great day, everybody.